I do have a YouTube channel, but it's a ghost town. I don't use it.
Yeah, I got another one as well, and I haven't posted anything in a long time.
One of my old housemates back in 2015 had a YouTube channel that he used to use for uploading his gaming moments. We're all watching them and enjoying ourselves immensely, but he was so embarrassed because it was like when he was a teenager.
Oh, glorious. Alright, well, that has worked. I'm seeing everyone's face on the thing. So let's get started with the first episode of the, what did I call this thing? Down Under Politics, or whatever it was, because I come up with original names, apparently.
Oh yeah,
You're being really creative.
Very creative.
Look, it says what it needs to say.
It says exactly what it needs to say.
As a resident autist in the room, I appreciate that.
Look, the thing that people need to understand is that for anyone outside of Australia that won't understand this because they're not Australian, we live in a country where everything is trying to and will kill you just because it can. We don't have time for, nonsense.
I mean, snakes, spiders, natural
Jellyfish.
disasters, but most importantly, the Liberal Party.
Yeah, they are actively trying to kill us all.
Totally agree.
So welcome to the Down Under Politics podcast. Since this is our first episode, we'll just go around the room and everyone can introduce themselves, give them, say, a rough background of where you sit politically, and the kind of people that you piss off the most when talking about politics online. So I'm Jonathan, and I am the loony left. Not a loony leftist, I am the loony left. I am exactly who Sky News tells you to be terrified of. Which is actually funny because I have a background in economics. That's what I'm formally trained in. So interesting that I end up there after having a good understanding of economics and looking at Australian politics. So take that for what it is. We'll go to David next.
All right, I'm David. Traditionally, I was very left-wing. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Zeitgeist movement. Perhaps that can be a topic at some point, but very left-wing in the past. Typically now a bit more centre-right, or I kind of appear right when in comparison to a lot of very left people. The people I piss off, Jono, is probably each party equally. The left hate me because I'm right because I'm in the centre, and then the right hate me because I'm in the centre. So I tend to piss off both sides pretty evenly.
I mean,
I think today I was pissing some Americans off on Twitter by advocating for gun laws. So
yeah, I piss them off for that stuff as well. I mean, yeah, and you literally are the centre.
Pretty much.
Which
I don't know if...
of all of Australia's political parties, puts you closest to the Greens. In a weird twist of irony.
Because that makes total sense, doesn't it?
Oh, it's almost as if the Overton window in Australia is shifted way to the right. And rather authoritarian, I might add, as well. We'll go to you next, Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom. I have probably been more left most of my life, but I tend to base my politics on which individual parties can actually prove what their policies are about and why they've done them, and it has me sort of swinging both ways with a lot of things, but generally I end up on the left side of things. The people I piss off most would be, I guess, religious people and people on the extreme ends of either end of the spectrum. Like just yesterday, I was talking to a quite right-wing friend, and he ended the conversation pretty abruptly. I don't know. I haven't heard back from him, so.
Fair.
Yeah.
Excellent. Mitch, we'll go to you next.
So my name's Mitchell. I guess you'd call me the token libertarian. I guess that puts me to the most economic right wing, but I annoy the Liberals the most because I'm not part of their party. Whenever I've been handing out how to vote cards for the party I've been a part of, and I say, oh, these are my principles, and they're just, why aren't you part of the Liberal Party? Ironically, despite the fact that I'm so far off to the right economically, I get along best with Greens when I'm handing out because we agree so much on civil liberties issues. So, yeah, I guess that's who I annoy.
Yeah, fair. Something we should probably mention, in Australia, our right-wing party is the Liberal Party, also known as the Liberal National Coalition, because it's like 4 different parties all joined together because none of them are good enough to form government on their own.
Not that they wish to admit that either.
No, they won't. And if you've been following anything that any of them have been saying lately, it looks like we might not even have a coalition anymore. Although they'll still continue to behave like one, even though they will deny that they exist.
Well,
They
the
talk a
Nationals
lot
have
of
needed,
smack about each other.
the Nationals have needed to stand up for themselves for a long time.
Oh, look, I think the Nationals just need to stop existing.
I agree.
The thing is, though, if Nationals actually listen to their farmers, like go listen to their base. Look, ask farmers, do you think climate change exists? And the farmers will say, obviously it exists. We see it in the way that our crops are growing and our seasons are changing for when we do what we need to. Like, maybe.
Unfortunately, for good politics, the Nationals don't need to do that to keep getting elected because all of the places they are, everyone is so disengaged from politics that they just vote habitually, and it's even like a generational thing. Like, for example, the seat of Lyons, where my father lives up in Taree, it's been a safe national seat for tens of years. Which doesn't sound like that long, but keep in mind that Australia's only existed as a country for like 120 years. Before that, it was part of the British Empire. So, tens of years is a long time. Yeah. Okay. Well, since we're already, starting to talk about politics, and what happened in the election, does anyone have a particular topic of the election they want to go to? Or did we want to just start by going over where things currently stand in this absolute shit show?
Well, I reckon we should recount where we're at the moment. That gives us a good way forward. Well,
look, just so that I can upset absolutely every friendly Geordies fan that stumbles across this, we're gonna I've just put the live results from the ABC on screen. So that'll upset everyone, which is fantastic. So at the moment,
me.
Oh, can we follow up? Can we follow up annoying every friendly Geordies fan by suggesting that we're the real Warhammer nerds?
Yes. Yes. Look, I've got Warhammer right here as well.
Hold on. For the Emperor. Anyway.
Look, I'm a filthy Xenos lover.
But anyway, I'm getting us off topic.
Back to the important bit. Election results. The Liberal National Party, or as they're also known, the Liberal Party, currently sitting at 57. So they don't stand a chance to hit the 76 needed to form a majority government, even though they still wouldn't be a majority government because it's 4 different parties joined together that are not officially joined together. Unless they win, then they are officially... It's really weird. The ALP, or the Australian Labor Party, also known to Sky News as the radical left, even though they are not even slightly left, which is hilarious, are currently sitting at 75. They need 76 to win, so they're not winning yet. And Other, which gives us the largest crossbench in Australian history. Previous record... actually, look, I know what it is, but has anyone actually looked up what the previous crossbench, largest crossbench was?
Was it like 7 or 8? I'm kind of guessing, but I feel like 7 or 8.
6.
6. Holy
Wow.
shit.
As it currently stands, 16 have been called for parties that are not the LNP or the ALP.
I love that.
So,
And the hilarious thing is most of them have come from the Liberal Party.
yes, because
ALP is only game seats.
the ALP has not gained as many as they were thinking. They thought they were going to win this in a landslide, when they have not. So yeah, that's where things currently stand. The 3 that are still in doubt are Deakin, which is looking to go to the Liberal Party, and it is stupid close. I mean, there's less than, there's literally 1% between the two leading candidates there at the moment, so that could flip-flop either way, realistically. Gilmore, which is even closer, with the Liberal Party currently sitting at 50.1% to the Labor Party's 49.9%, with only 214 votes between them, so that could go either way. And the one I find most interesting is McNamara, which, I mean, looking at this, you'd think, why haven't they called that yet? The Labor Party are currently sitting at 61.5%. The TLDR of it is very complicated, so there is no TLDR. Basically, due to the way our system works, because we have preferential voting, parties down here that are being knocked out, you can then choose who the second one, so you can then effectively simulate lots of different elections running the one election, all on the one ballot paper, which is why it's a fantastic system, provided people know how to use it. It means that people that, like One Nation, but are terrified that the Labour or Greens will get in, don't have to vote for the Labour or Green, don't have to vote for the Liberal Party straight up. They can vote One Nation and then put the Liberal Party second, which means they can go for the candidate they like, but not risk their vote accidentally going to support the party they don't like. Which is why, despite this not looking close, it is very close, because there is a greater than 0 chance that the Labor Party ends up in third, gets knocked out, and then their preferences are more likely to flow to the Greens than to the Liberal Party, which would then mean that the Greens will win this seat. So it's way up in the air at the moment. Anyone want to make a comment on McNamara and how it's going?
Where is McNamara?
Very good question, and I wish I knew, because
It is in Melbourne, Port of Melbourne, and South Bank, right near the CBD, just to the south.
Okay, fair enough. So down there,
Sort of the St Kilda area.
which would explain why the Greens got nearly 30% of the primary vote down there.
That would
think
do
it's-
it, yeah.
I think it's important to mention, Jono, that if Labor win this, they then have the 76 and can govern in their own right. If they don't win, there's a possibility they then are required to work with the Greens party.
Well, not necessarily even the Greens, because there's all these
Yeah,
other
there's
independents. They
anyone.
only need one more to
A
form
lot of
government.
independents. And they work really well with the Fisher and Shooters party. So they'd probably team up with them a little bit.
Did they get a seat?
I'm
I don't
just
know if they did.
trying to go have a look now.
I think Shooters and Fishers mainly run in New South Wales in the state elections.
Or the Senate?
They're basically across if you look at their economic policies, they're mainly Labor and National Party policies, but they like guns as well.
They do like their guns. It's in their name.
Yeah.
But it's literally just, if you can't decide whether you want to vote for Labor or the Nationals in terms of who's going to give you more handouts to the farm, then you would vote for Shooters and Fishers. It's expanded beyond simply gun enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to the motoring enthusiast party?
They stopped existing, I think.
Yeah, they
got
didn't really have
one
an opinion on anything outside of motoring, so they
I was
I
like
vote
all
for them
those,
every time.
The government tried very hard to get rid of them too. After they got elected, the government's like, well, we can't let preference deals be a thing because then we might actually have a crossbench in the Senate. Then we might actually have to listen to the people. And
Well, that's why back in, I think it was 2016, they changed the way that the preferential voting system worked. So that, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I remember it was that if you voted above the line, you just put a 1 in the box for who you wanted, and then whoever that party's preference was where your preference flowed to.
Yes.
Whereas now it's you have to, number up to 6 of them. And you no longer have to vote below the line to choose the order of your preferences. And
that system...
It was because a party called the Motoring Enthusiasts, in other words, people whose entire political view is, we like cars, decided they wanted to run for politics and they won a seat. And the major party was just like, look, we can't have these guys coming in and shaking up the way that we do things. Ironically, here we are several years later with the biggest crossbench we've ever had.
More than that too, with another single issue party having had a very real run at a Senate seat, namely Legalised Cannabis Party in Queensland.
Yeah.
Which,
I always found those single issue parties interesting, like the Bullet Train Party.
Oh, I remember that
one of them.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. It's like, what are they going to do? They're going to get into government and be like, yeah, okay, let's build a bullet train. Then, like, once it's built, they're like, okay, we're good. See you.
Done.
Mission accomplished.
No, we're done. We're leaving.
I actually find if you look into their policies in detail, a lot of the really specific ones, they'll have that as like their main thing, but then on everything else, they either follow one of the major parties or they actually just listen to experts, which is what I love. Any politician that just listens to experts because they're not experts themselves, they get my vote. But not all of them. Some of them are crazy, like the the Animal Rights Party, I think it is.
Look, generally when you find any of the parties that are way out on the fringes in any direction, you'll find them. That's where the crazies usually congregate.
Oh, it's like your favourite one, Jono, the Health Party.
Oh, the informed medical. So I got a funny story about this. I know of several people who I will not name, as this is really fucking embarrassing for them. They despite the fact that our Senate ballot paper, you don't have to number every box above the line, just up to 6 of them. And there's 100 parties on there. The sheet gets longer every single year. It's ridiculous. But even though they only had to pick 6, they still accidentally voted for a party called the Informed Medical Opinions Party, which, sounds like a great party. One problem. It's a red herring and they're anti-vaxxers.
So I think you mean the Misinformed Medical Opinions Party.
Yes. So I got several text messages from people just as they came out of voting and were like, who are these people I just voted for? And it's like, fuck, I just voted for anti-vaxxers.
Not gonna lie, I think I did that in 2013 too. I voted
think
for a
we've all
party.
done it at one point. Misleading names. There was, I forget what it was, but there's been parties like that over the years that are they have very misleading names. Unlike the Motoring Enthusiasts, which are very clear what they're all about. No ambiguity there, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm sure you'd all agree.
Actually, I wanted to ask a question of Tom. He said that he thought that the Animal Justice Party had a fair few loonies in it. I'm just wondering if he can unpack that for us, because I find that quite interesting that he said that.
Well, it's with the way I've seen them act personally. So they had little booths set up and went to vote, and they seem to want to enforce veganism on everyone. I think they didn't originally get set up for that. It was more just trying to help protected species and set up proper animal shelters and stuff like that. But it's gone downhill, and it pretty much just should be called the vegan party now, I think.
So, and Jono, forgive me for saying this, it's all the obnoxious parts of the Greens and none of the actual good policy.
Yeah, that sounds like a fair assessment. Look,
Yeah.
I will be very upfront. I voted one for the Greens because I like their housing policy. I like their climate policies. I like a lot of their economic policies, especially around welfare, minimum wage, etc. Their border policies, I think, I'm a bit iffy on some of their border policies, but I find, climate policies and economic policies, they rank higher than border policies for me personally. Which I think is, going back to the political compass, is a bit where a lot of those political compasses fall flat on their face, because it ranks all the different aspects of what makes up someone's political identity equally, whereas different issues are not equal for anyone.
Yeah.
What would be a good example? I don't know, Mitch. What's something that you highly value and what's something you don't care about?
Okay. How many of us am I going to annoy if I say I really like guns and I don't particularly care for minimum wage issues? So,
That's fine. You've just upset a lot of people, so that's good because the more people you can upset, the better.
So for me, as a libertarian, I should care about minimum wage not being a thing. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not really bothered about minimum wage. But comparatively speaking, yeah, the firearm aspect of it is what I more go for.
Okay, so your libertarianism manifests more from a social libertarian rather than an economic libertarian?
I guess you could say that, yeah. I'm more in favour of ensuring lack of privacy invasion, surveillance state sort of thing. That really concerns me. I think that the people should be a valid counterweight to the institution of government.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. And I am the loony left. Oh, I'm going to mention that every time. It's...
I can only agree, and I assume my voice is coming through. Sorry, I had to do a quick headset change because my AirPods decided to go flat. But yeah, like what you just said, you say you like guns. As much as and this is maybe where I'm kind of the same. Like I can understand the appeal of owning a gun, having a gun, and all that kind of stuff. But I also understand the idea of having laws on it, and I don't think like Australia has gun laws. Our gun laws are probably a little too strict, but in comparison to like America, where there's just nothing pretty much, and it's like open slather. That's to me, that's a bit too extreme. So it's kind of like I almost think that they're better in between. But and like minimum wage, I'd probably agree. To me, it's like in Australia, minimum wage actually isn't that low compared to probably the US. I think actually when you work out the math, how they're pushing over in the US for $15 minimum wage, that's pretty much bringing them up to what we have here in Australia. So it kind of makes sense over there, but here in Australia, it doesn't. It's
Off the back of that, and correct me if I've misassessed here, Mitchell, but when you say you don't really give a toss about minimum wage, I'm understanding that you mean that from the perspective of because libertarians usually want no minimum wage at all, but you're just like, if there's a minimum wage,
Yeah, I think we should deal with if we really want to I don't think it suits libertarians' best interests in a highly socialised country like Australia with good social safety nets. I don't think it suits our interests to argue against a minimum wage, because people will see that as, oh, you want people to be poor or not to be able to look after themselves, or you want people to have 2 jobs in order to support their family. I'm like, I don't think that's what we want. If I were to argue for an increase in wages, I'd actually want it to be because we're educating our population, we're bringing automated manufacturing back to Australia, which requires workers who are skilled as opposed to more cheap labour from other countries, sort of thing. I think that would, like, if there's more jobs in Australia, creating more competition for wages, but at the same time, automation making it profitable to manufacture in Australia regardless of the wages, like we're seeing coming back to America and Europe, I don't see why the minimum wage should be an issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, if your political ideology, because I think something that's common with just about every political ideology, excluding those that are way out on fringes in either direction, is that everyone agrees that they want everyone to have the basics, have opportunities to become fabulously wealthy if they want to. They don't want to see anyone starving to death. It's just we disagree about how best to go about doing that. But then at the end of the day, if your ideology has proper, like, predictive utility, like if you were to implement everything to do with the ideology the way that it sees it, you wouldn't need a minimum wage anyway, because everyone would have a job that makes them enough money. Under a libertarian framework, and correct me if I'm incorrect on assessing the framework there.
No, that's fairly accurate.
But
yeah.
The flip side of that coin should also be true. It also, if your ideology is correct, having a minimum wage shouldn't have a negative impact on anything as well. So you shouldn't really be bothered by it being there because no one will use it. But if no one's using it, then why would you be upset about it existing?
Yeah, like, I mean, they say that if you bring in a minimum wage in America, it will cause inflation. Well, we have a higher minimum wage in Australia. It doesn't really cause inflation. The only thing that's really causing inflation is, well, supply issues, as we've talked about in previous conversations, supply of money, all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, and
I think, and I was going to say this before, I would rather see, and I'm kind of agreeing with Mitchell here, but I would rather see the minimum wage raised than the increase in social security funding. So someone like Centrelink or something, unemployment benefits, I would rather see the minimum wage raised than that funded, because I would see it as that would, as much as yet, and we could get to jobs in a sec, but that will create more of an incentive to get a job, because it'd be like, well, you can be on this income, which is probably not very good and kind of shit. But if you get a job, your life increases so much more from working that's where I would see the benefit, rather for people who aren't working. I think that would make it.
Yeah, I agree and disagree at the same time with you on that one. I mean, when I started working for a particular major telecommunications company in Australia, which I won't name because... Oh, look, story time, everyone.
Reason.
Because people on the internet are insane, is basically the answer. So I have another YouTube channel where I talk about Warhammer stuff, and I don't post very regularly because I don't have time to do it anymore. But at one point, I made a joke comparing Donald Trump to a hot air gun. Because it's loud and blows hot air. You know, just a, tongue-in-cheek, haha, very funny kind of joke. A few months after I posted that video, I got a text message from an employer that I was no longer working for at the time, saying, hey, you should probably be careful about what you say online, as someone contacted the company and tried to get you fired.
Wow.
Hate that.
So yeah, that's why on basically every social media platform, instead of saying who I actually work for, I say big tech company as an artificial intelligence babysitter. So yeah, that's
that accurately kind of describes my job.
Look, it very much
as
does.
retarded as
I think it accurately describes what we do pretty well.
What would that make me, the artificial intelligence guinea pig? I'm at it win.
Yeah, pretty much.
I want to, Jono, I reckon you should answer the question you asked Mitchell, flip it on, what is something you care about and something you don't?
Something I care about, climate change.
It's gonna piss everyone off.
Climate change, definitely something I care about, which, I've already pissed off all of Sky News already, just by saying that, because obviously climate change is not real, it's always changing. What's another common climate denier argument? The Earth is wobbling, that's a good one.
Solar activity.
Solar activity, yes. That's another one that they like to ramp out and show how little they understand about the topic.
I love it when they point out the Earth wobbling one.
What was that?
If you actually, I love it when they point out that Earth wobbling one, because if you actually go off that, we should be cooling down now.
Well, we should be.
It's
Also,
the
Earth wobbling thing, that happens over, like a cycle of that is 41,000 years.
Yeah. But in their lifetime,
So, I mean, I don't think we'd be seeing that. I don't think it functionally hasn't changed at all in the time that we're seeing, climate change happening. But something I could not give a toss about, and this is going to absolutely piss off everyone that is even remotely left of anyone, is women in Parliament. I do not care I could not care less about the gender of who's in Parliament. If you want women in Parliament, great. If not, I don't care.
I agree. I don't care. So therefore, don't make a law about it.
I mean, if you want to make a law about it, I don't care. If you came to me and said, hey, we want to make a law about this, but we'll also do something about climate change, go ahead. If I get the thing I want out of it, I don't care.
I will say I don't think there should be quota laws, but I am really happy that my party ran a lot of female candidates at the last election. I think, you don't want to force people to do it, but I think it can be good to get a diversity of ideas, and especially in the industry I'm going into, women are better at some things because they are more conservative. They're less risk averse, so they're more likely to they're less likely to lose money doing what they do.
Yeah, that's
I think
fair. And look, I mean, I'm also cool. Parties are running more women. Great, I suppose. I mean, if that's the sort of thing that you like, I see it more of as a strategic thing for the parties than anything else.
I just like it not being a sausage fest in the party room.
Oh, look, there's that too. Although the people in the party room and the prayer room, for that matter, probably are not that fussed about that. Which actually, speaking of your party, Mitchell, I got into an argument with the candidate from your party that was running in my electorate.
Oh, which one's your electorate? Sorry,
Patterson.
Hold on, I have to look this up. I've got the seats here, so give me a moment. I have to find out who this guy was, because I may actually...
was a lady.
Hold on.
Because apparently that's important, I suppose.
I think
I'd have to agree with you on that. I just don't care about that stuff. If they want to make rules about it and those rules end up being stupid, they will eventually get changed back. So if they want to do that, go ahead and let them do that stuff. But yeah,
I do not know the person.
all
I haven't
good
had the opportunity
because
to meet her.
basically they put up a post, and I think you're probably going to disagree with what I'm about to say here, but they put up a post saying that they want, what was it? They want people to be risen out of poverty, and they're going to do that by cutting social services.
Just leave that one to sit for a bit.
How?
And so I was like, look, that makes no sense. They also said that they wanted to introduce a flat tax and gave me a link to their policies if I wanted to read more. So I was like, sure, I will read more. So I went to the policy page and looked at that, and the first thing that I was like, look, either you don't know what a flat tax is, or all of my economics lecturers lied to me.
Yeah, it's not I can speak to that policy. It's not a flat tax.
It's not a flat tax. No libertarian would actually call a tax with 2 tax brackets a flat tax. It's just
No, it's
not.
But yeah, I cannot, I can only support the people in my party who are doing what they can. I don't wish to denigrate any of not only my party but people who are standing for any party, putting themselves out there, sometimes at great personal cost because it costs money to run.
Yeah.
I don't want to say, oh, I'm just going to pick apart the efforts of someone who's done something that I haven't done this time around.
Oh, look, it's a bee that really gets under my bonnet when people make an argument about something, and if you have any understanding of that topic, you can see that they have no idea what they're talking about just from the way they phrase their argument. Like
The entire Liberal Party.
Yeah, the entire Liberal Party.
If you actually check up on what they say, especially if they're criticising another party, that's usually that. They're just proving they have no idea what they're talking about. It's very frustrating because they've won elections on made up stuff.
Oh, they've won elections based off of we're good economic managers, and the only response I can ever come up with is, by what metric?
The thing that shits me with all their advertising is they never say why we should vote for them. They always say why we should not vote for Labor, and that's what pisses me off the most. It's like, sell what you're gonna do, not just say don't vote for that guy, because to me that's just a shit campaign.
Well, I also saw that a lot, not from the Labor Party itself, but from people who support the Labor Party. So, and here I go pissing off friendly Geordies fans again. The Common Sense Brigade, where there's so much common sense, which if you break the term apart and look at its core...
They've common sensed more than anybody else can sense commonly.
Well, I mean, if you look at the term common sense, it's made up of common and sense. Given that your average person is not an expert in any particular field, why should I trust what they have to say about that particular field? If you pick a random person and ask them an economics question, chances are they have no clue what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So appeals to common sense really piss me off for that reason. But I had a guy arguing that if you vote 1 for Labor and 2 for the independent or minor party you like more than Labor, it will not hurt the candidate that you like more than Labor.
Right.
How to break preferential voting.
Um,
How to not understand it.
So I found the argument incredibly disingenuous, and this guy did not like me pointing that out at all. And basically, the argument few back and forth, and it came down to the point that yes, it will hurt the independent in a case where it's them versus Labor, but that's fine because I want Labor to win. And it's like, okay, that's a fine position to have, but at least be honest about it.
Yeah.
don't go and try and tell people that it won't hurt the chances of the candidate they like more. That's not how our system works. It's not a competition between the Labour Party and the Liberal Party. It seems that way most of the time, but it technically doesn't have to be. So yeah, there's my rant about the Common Sense Brigade and all of their common sense.
But, yeah, not a lot of experts, but I do like the memes.
Oh, the memes are absolutely hilarious. But some of the stuff they said was just plain dumb and pissed me off to the point where I left the group because I'd had enough.
most people don't check up on things, so memes are enough to win an election.
Mind you, when it comes to the Common Sense Brigade,
Trump
Friendly
would agree.
Geordie's fan club, I think after the nuclear debate, he lost a lot of people who were pro-evidence-based policy.
Well,
Yeah.
he did a lot of dodgy editing tricks in that, didn't he?
He did. So I don't know how much I should say about this, but I actually know personally the guy with whom he was debating. And have you guys all seen the Coke Blocked video?
Yep.
A long time ago.
Yeah, well, that guy he's actually a friend of mine on Facebook, and we move in the same. Not so much anymore because he now works in America, but yeah, he. So the story behind this is that one of my friends put up a post in the party Facebook group and says, "Hey, Friendly Geordies is doing a debate, and hey, who wants to go down and debate him?" And this friend actually messaged me and said, "Hey, you interested in doing this?" And it sounds interesting, but we never got around to it. And honestly, I'm glad that we never did, because but this guy, like on a whim, says, "Yeah, I'm going to go down and do it." And we're all like, "Cool, let us know how it goes." So went down, debated. They put the Geordies then put the whole unedited debate up on YouTube, and he got ripped apart in the comments because half his people are supporters of nuclear power, because young people generally are.
Logical.
And a lot of young people are across the issues of nuclear power. They know how it's advanced over the last 50 years. We're not building Chernobyl, Fukushima reactors. And they quite rightly tore him to pieces for his faulty reasoning. So then he comes back with another video about how this guy was supposedly funded by Koch brothers' money, to which his organization hilariously released a response saying, "No, we're not. But if this gives you any ideas, Koch brothers, why don't you give us some money?"
Glorious.
Because the Koch, they don't fund outside America. They only fund American causes. So yeah, like Geordies was making conspiracies and insinuations about where this guy gets and the organization gets its funding, and those insinuations were just flat out wrong.
I guess that is the problem that you run into when you support one party religiously to the point that it's no longer about policies or what's correct or not. It's about us versus them.
Yeah. I think the Friendly Geordie's opinion on nuclear energy is one of the very few things I actually disagree with him on. But I can see where he comes from with it. His overall opinion seems to be that it's even if you have really good technology and really good safety on them now, you still have to trust the government to be enforcing that properly, and our government hasn't proven itself to be trustworthy. So we need to take that into consideration. I understand that. I disagree with it.
You know, I'm actually kind of surprised that he went for the arguments that he went for with it, because there's a fairly strong economic argument against nuclear energy. And not just because, just to be clear for all the nuclear energy advocates out there, I'm not saying that, it costs more to produce than other energy sources. It's cheaper in the long run. It is cheaper in the long run. The problem is with the way that a lot of energy generation is funded, and the sheer ridiculous amount of time that nuclear power plants take to construct. Be that because there's a lot of regulation in place, which, let's be clear, you kind of need that regulation in place for nuclear energy to be safe.
Yeah, and by the time it's built, renewables in this country at least should be a bigger market.
Yeah, and that's my position on nuclear is simple as this. It was something that would have been a good idea for us to do 30 years ago. Now, with the advances we've had in renewables, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to be going for it at this point.
Not in this country, anyway. But
having said that, I think there is something to be said for having the option open for a variety of clean energy sources. Now, obviously, you can make the argument that small modular reactors are 10 years off, and in that time, renewable energy sources will have advanced in an equivalent way. But having said that, why would you not give people, even if it is the less economical option, is it always the less economical option? Or would it be better in certain remote communities? Would it be better for high energy generation things, like if we go to hydrogen steel rather than carbon steel using coking coal? Could it be more important to have those high energy generation sort of things for those plants rather than trying to rely on renewables, which would eat into the what the rest of society needs, if that makes sense.
I think
the potential.
When it comes to nuclear,
The potential of nuclear.
Sorry, David, I'll let you go. Oh, okay. Well, I'll go then. When it comes to nuclear, like any technology, the more money you invest in it, the better it's going to get. And with nuclear, a big part of it is speed of construction. So small modular reactors, which if they can get that to work, great. But it kind of seems like small modular reactors have been 10 years away for the past 10 years. So, I mean, I'm not an expert on nuclear energy at all. But given that people have been saying it's 10 years away for 10 years, it kind of feels a lot like, how fusion power has been 30 years away for the past 60 years. I
think with small modular reactors,
it should take off. I think on Earth itself, renewables are just the way to go at this point. With the way we can't change the past, so moving forward, I think they are the best way to go. For applications where like energy density size-wise is super important, I think that's where nuclear energy could potentially take off with potential space exploration.
I think there's also another problem with nuclear energy, and sorry, you were going to say?
I was just going to say, nuclear's potential isn't exactly, I think, scalability or anything. It's going to be that base load, because, like right now, overnight, we are still consuming power in like with solar, and that there's that, I think they call it the duck curve of solar stops in the afternoon, and that's right when energy peaks and everyone wants to use it. And I think that's where nuclear has the potential, and I agree with what Jono said, though, it is significantly more expensive to build a nuclear power plant than it is to build a gas or a coal power plant. It's just simply cheaper to build something else. But nuclear does have that potential of base load, constant power that we then, on top of the base, use solar, wind, and
that's where
battery storage and stuff.
That's where energy storage comes in. Like the base load is becoming less of an issue now that we have so much solar and wind attached, because it's more of a modular system that can adapt much better. So you don't really need the base load there anymore. And where you do, energy storage is another area of renewables that we could be building an entire economy on. That it's much easier for us to set up here than most other places in the world.
Well, another economic thing that puts nuclear energy in trouble, and I say this as an avid nuclear energy advocate. Speaking with current technology, nuclear plants only come in one size, and that's extra large. And what we've got to do then is we've got to make these nuclear plants run for like 80 years, and they can do that, but because of the prohibitive cost and lead time in putting them up, of like fighting court cases, like in authoritarian countries, you can put them up in 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. But in Australia, you would not get them done in at least the next 20 years because the anti-nuclear lobby is as strong as it is. And that's just a factor. It's just a fact of life here. Yeah. So if you were to build a nuclear power plant today using today's technology, that thing is good for 80 years. But you're only really going to see proper returns for it after about 30 or 40, and that is outside of the timescale that most investors are willing to hang on for. This is the thing that makes renewables economically more viable, in that they have a far quicker payoff for institutional investors who would want to put money into it. Granted, nuclear power plants might have 4 times the longevity of solar wind installations, but those renewable sources are far more attractive because they just pay off quicker.
Yeah, which is ultimately, the economic argument I was making. I forget who it was. Someone did a really, I think it was...
You're thinking of Engineering Explained?
No,
not Engineering Explained.
It wasn't. It was
Real Engineering.
Real Engineering. Yeah, I think I sent that one to you, David. Basically did a short life cycle analysis of a nuclear power plant versus a gas power plant over like a 30-year time span, and the gas power plant, because it starts producing revenue within 18 months of the project starting, it's and because power projects are funded extremely heavily off debt, you don't accrue that interest before you start producing revenue with the nuclear power, whereas other options, gas, renewable, oil, whatever it is, you can just build them faster. And that's before you even consider like political aspects, like what happens if somehow, let's just say a hypothetical scenario where the government that's just getting in now decides we're going to go nuclear and starts building a nuclear power plant. What happens in 3 years' time when we have another election, and if that government's turfed out?
Well, we saw that with the NBN.
Yeah, it's the NBN repeating itself, where we now have an NBN that is shit.
No, we're getting the original plan now. What?
For what?
How many years
Twice
later?
the price?
13 years later, we're getting the original plan for, probably twice the price.
So at my old place down in Sydney, we actually had cable internet, which was really good. We had excellent deal on it. And when we got the NBN, it was a worse service for like $20 more per month. Like at that point, I actively didn't want NBN because I had a better program.
But you don't have a choice in the matter, unfortunately, because the legislation was set up.
It's ridiculous, is what it is. I should have had the opportunity to, opt out of the NBN if I wanted to. But I mean, another thing is too. Apparently, Telstra Optus wanted to update their infrastructure in 2005, and the government said no. And the government apparently told them they couldn't do that, and then the government comes out with NBN. So I do find myself wondering what was the objective with all of that.
To be honest, I think the intention at the start of the NBN was good. The intention was to give Australia fibre internet to every premises initially. We then had a change of government to the shit party, from the shit light party, and basically Murdoch, who owns most of Australian media, turned around and was like, look, this thing's a threat to my business model. Kill it.
Yeah, I mean, I will quote the truest thing that Pauline Hanson has ever said. We need better internet because our kids should not be pwned by kids overseas.
I should have voted for it. Shit.
Like, she supported it's hilarious, like 10 years ago she supported the NBN because like her reasoning was she wants Australian kids to do better in online gaming.
She's that patriotic. She'll go against her side of politics just to be a patriot.
Look, I feel really dirty for saying this, but I agree with Pauline Hanson on that. There we go. It turns out that the loony left agrees with the batshit insane right.
It's horseshoe theory. Horseshoe theory it is.
Wait, is that no? That's Michael in this group, isn't it? Mitchell. Sorry,
Mitchell. Yeah.
I think I read your name as Michael a while
Everyone
ago.
does.
I can't get it out of my head.
Look, honestly, it's probably a good thing if I'm looking for a job and my name is different on this thing. I don't want an employer that would vote for the Liberal Party hear me slagging out the Liberals and just like, maybe I won't pick him up.
Which, let's be honest, is probably a good number of employers.
Yeah, especially in my field that I'm going into, which I won't state at the moment.
Yeah, look, based on my previous experience with having your internet presence linked to what you do for a living, it's probably a wise move to not disclose that. Especially when you're slagging off the Liberal Party.
Look, to be honest, after the last 3 years, they deserve it.
Oh, look, I mean, in the last 3 years, we've had the country set on fire, and that is not hyperbole. We've had a once-in-a-100-year pandemic, which granted they couldn't have helped, but the way they handled it was shit. I mean, with every policy that they put in place that actually helps people, they had the shit light party dragging them to it, kicking and screaming, and then they still found a way to pork barrel it, basically. Or maybe not pork barrel it, but rig it so that it helps their sponsors. Yeah, sponsors is a good word, not donors. They're sponsors.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Jerry Harvey.
I mean, well, they've repaid him quite generously with that, haven't they?
Oh, look, I suppose they did, but only because I'm pretty sure that people were literally going to build a guillotine on his front lawn if he didn't.
Yeah. Goodness gracious.
So, I mean, there was that. Then there was, floods, which I think is part of the reason why a lot of the Teal independents and the Greens did so well in this election, because the effects of climate change are bloody obvious this time.
And especially in those electorates, because that's where the floods happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, even wealthy people that vote for the Liberal Party can clearly see that it's going to cost them a shitload of money, a lot more than they'll save on their taxes, if, climate change gets much worse, which it's going to, because they're kind of a bit late to the party.
It's rough.
I'm curious, when we did the two axis, right? Keep thinking four. The two axis quiz. Did you guys do quite strongly on a lot of answers, or did you guys tend to say just agree, disagree?
I was quite strong on a fair few, but and Mitch, you may want to cover your ears for this bit. But basically every one of the religious questions, I was just like, strongly disagree.
Yeah, I'm like, look, to be honest, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
I mean, I am the loony left communist.
See, those ones I strongly... wait, no, I don't think I said strongly disagree to some. I can't remember the questions.
I went through and strongly disagreed to every single one of those.
Yeah. I think I strongly disagreed to a lot of the religious ones. Not all of them, though. There were a few others I strongly agreed or disagreed to, but the majority of it was just mild. Just things I actually care about.
Well, the thing I didn't understand about the religious questions is there was never a clear thing of, is this your personal values or is this something that you want to impose on society? Because if it's my personal values, then yeah, I am quite strongly religious. If it's something if I want to impose on society, like I know people who want to do that. They're terrible people. I'd rather not not be a thing.
Don't want to be associated with that.
No, I'm part of a group that has a lot of militant, I think is the best word for it, Catholics in it.
Oh God.
Look, the Protestants can dish it out if they're dunked on, and the Orthodox people are generally pretty chill either way. They manage to stay out of it because both Catholics and Protestants tend to like them in some way. But the Catholics just constantly dunk on the Protestants, and there were some people in that group that were unironically calling for a crusade so that they could kill people they disagreed with, and it was just like,
look, as long as they are willing to dress up in metal suits with big crosses on them and swords and all of that, I'm totally on board with that.
Now that's not something I ever thought I'd hear you say.
Look, and here's my reasoning for it. The way I see it, if all of the people that are that insane about their beliefs want to go and kill each other, less stupid people on the planet. I'm joking, of course.
Look, I was this close to telling someone, okay, so you talk a big game, why don't you just go out and do it? If this is something you feel so strongly about, why don't you obey the voice of what you think God is saying? And why don't you just go out and start? And that would obviously have been a very dangerous thing to say. But
yeah,
like
I could see that being something you regret saying later when there's been like a mass shooting.
Yeah, it's just like, no, but like at some you're either talking empty boasting, or you genuinely believe that, and
in which case get help.
Oh look, there's a bit of a meme in a lot of the atheist groups that I'm in about how all religious people have mental illness, but I think the people that are serious about doing that sort of thing genuinely have mental health issues.
They would have to. Like, there's got to be something wrong.
It's just the tribal mentality. So we as humans evolved to have a tribal mindset, and us and them mindset, and some people, like the lowest form of that is religion. And then you go up to like your small tribe, your family, your town, whatever, and then it's cities, countries, the world. People can't adjust up in that level of tribal mentality from the lowest levels, and they end up sounding crazy to the rest of us who see a bigger world. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't realise, Mitchell, you were religious, but that kind of explains your result a bit more now. As to why you were so far right. I'm like, okay, makes sense. Because I think I said that because you got markets and that as quite free, and I'm like, okay, that's probably pushing you that way, but and
yeah,
very libertarian as well.
That is probably what it is. Like, I'm full on in favour of like weed legalization, all of that sort of thing. Like, if it's a victimless crime, it shouldn't be a crime. All of that, like if it doesn't hurt me, if it doesn't infringe on my right to do what I want, then I don't care if you do it, quite frankly. But yeah, that's probably what did it. Yeah, I try not to make a big deal about being religious, because I feel like that's the sort of thing that people have to ask you about if they're genuinely interested. And Jono can probably attest to this, since we grew up in the same sort of area, which I've since learned is the absolute most bat crap crazy version of that denomination that you can have. Like they were at a point where they were, shouldn't say too much, but hey, I'm never going to be a minister anyway. They were at a point where they were actually picking up people who'd taken 3 or 4 months of training over people who'd had 4 years of training because they thought they were more faithful having had less education. I think that kind of says a lot about the way they see education now, doesn't it?
In terms of education, would you did you agree with a lot of the questions about putting religious studies into education? Or
sorry, say that last one again.
Did you agree on a lot of the questions where they were implying that we need more religion in education?
So my perspective on that is that I think it is good to know about other religions. I am a big fan of what we call non-confessional religious education, comparative religion. I find, as personally, I find it to be really interesting, and there's things from other religions that I think are genuinely true things. I think not focusing on your desires like Buddhism does. I think you can genuinely be a happier person, or at the very least suffer less if you do that. Do I think that everyone should be taught what we call confessional religious education? I think that infringes on parents' rights to determine what their kids learn. Like, sure, do it at a religious school where that's the stated purpose, but I don't think you should have proselytizing religious education in a state school unless parents have opted into something like special religious education. And there is a worthwhile alternative provided for kids who might not be doing that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, my daughter is in primary school now, and, you know, they sent a letter home saying, do you want her to attend this religious thing? And we were just like, yeah, no, she can just go and, you know, do just dance stuff if she wants instead.
And honestly, having sat in on a religious education thing when I was doing my prac at a local public high school, the quality of teaching isn't that great because the teachers come in once a week. They don't have that good a rapport with the students because they're in there once a week. They don't see them. They're volunteers. It is so much harder to get the class motivated to learn, and not everyone in that class actually wants to be there. Some are put there by their parents because their parents think they should have some kind of vague moral instruction.
Yeah, well, I mean, off the back of that, I think there's a good chance, and I don't have any statistics to back up. This is purely feeling, so we're purely in the feeling zone now. But I think there's a good chance that a lot of the parents that do send their kids to that sort of thing do it because they see that you have to have some kind of religious framework to be a good person. And I mean, I don't agree with that position.
Yeah. I was talking to someone yesterday that has that position.
Aren't they fun people?
They think he's not religious. He used to be, but he
oh, okay. Well, I guess he's
turned
not
away.
moral
But
then.
he kept a lot of the values, and he thinks that it's the only real way to have a functioning society is to have most of the people in it religious, to keep them all in line. But if you look at statistics globally, more secular countries have better standards of living, higher education, less crime,
Less violence
on every metric. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing... Oh, sorry, you go say.
And in regards to like education in religious education in schools, I'm sort of the opposite, where I think there can be religious schools, but they shouldn't be classed as schools, and it shouldn't be classed as an education if they're not going to teach certain things like evolution and stuff like that. They should still teach everything and just have a religious aspect to it.
And you'll find that's what most schools are.
Most of them do. I've heard of some people going to schools where you can get in trouble for saying that you believe in evolution, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Great.
I think that's more of an issue in a place like the United States than in Australia. I mean, Australia was founded by criminals. You know, there's the old-fashioned saying of, you know, New South Wales is cell block A. You've got, you know, cell block B over in WA. But because of that, I think religion is less of an institutional thing here. I mean, it's still definitely very institutional and entwined in, like, government and stuff. Like, the fact that Albanese was sworn in as Prime Minister and didn't, you know, make an appeal to a deity, that made news.
I like it.
So that shows that there still is kind of an expectation of that, but I don't think it's as bad as, like, if that same thing happened in the United States, I'm sure we can all imagine how that would go.
They're much worse.
Another thing to consider too is how did religion come to how did Christianity come to Australia? It came with Samuel Marsden, who was known to the convicts as the flogging parson. He was not a nice man. He took great delight in forcing the convicts to do what he saw was their religious duty, and he punished them if they didn't do that. You've also got to consider that Catholicism was actively oppressed among the Irish as well. So, and that's actually, fun fact, the reason why Halloween isn't a big thing in Australia, whereas it's a big thing in America, because Halloween isn't actually a pagan holiday, it's a Catholic holiday. The Protestants tried to tie it back to paganism in order to discredit it. But in America, Catholics had a lot more institutional equality than they did in the fledgling colonies of New South Wales, where basically, like, here there was a priest, but like they made life as hard for the Catholics as they possibly could. And a lot of that Irish Catholic culture has been stamped out in Australia because of the convict authorities. And I don't know where I was going with that. Where was I going with that?
But we were going here, and off the back of that, I think also, you know, a lot of the national, for lack of a better word, national guilt that's felt around the stolen generation, where they were, you know, stolen from their parents, put into servitude in wealthy households, and you know, and part of the argument of doing that was to give them a religious indoctrination.
Yeah.
Which leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
So my girlfriend's grandma was actually knew personally one of the girls from Rabbit Proof Friends.
Oh.
Who remained a committed, you know, religious person for the rest of her life, because that stuck.
Yeah, well, it turns out that when you ram ideas into the mind of a child, that you can get them to stick pretty effectively.
Yep.
We should probably make a distinction at this point between transmission of values from parent to child, which I think every parent has the right to transmit their values, versus taking kids and forcing them out of their homes, making them believe something that causes them to lose the culture that they were born into.
Oh yeah, those two things are very, very different. I mean, whether you want to or not, you are going to impart your values onto your children if you have children. Obviously, if you don't have children, this won't happen. But in the same way that your children are going to speak the same language you speak, just because they learn by copying you, they're going to see what you do, and they're going to pick up those values, whether you want them to or not. Which I hope that's a fairly non-controversial thing, although it's the internet we're talking about, so who knows?
I like to think there's a good amount of profound stuff in here that'll balance out all the stuff that's going to annoy people.
Yeah, mainly, but profound stuff doesn't get you to go viral. You know.
You gotta
someone say
say
something
that
racist.
it's cancelled.
But yeah, I mean, I don't have anything else to add to that.
I thought you summed it up really well.
I think that was on that question that we were talking about religious values. That was where because me and my partner did the quiz, and we were talking about Jono, I think you So you touched on, it's the nuance in the question where how you interpret it obviously changes your answer. You might interpret it differently, but I think the question was, do you think schools should instill religious values? And I'm sure Tom will find it odd, but I actually said agree. But it's because when I read the question, I read it as religious values. They're talking about the values that a religion would have, not the religion itself. So that was my interpretation of the question was, yes, I do want that. Like if I had kids, yes, I would want that. I would want that. I would want those values taught, but you can teach the values without necessarily teaching religion in a indoctrinating kind of way, or this is definitely 100% true kind of way. You can still teach it, and I think it's what you were saying before, Mitchell, about confessional versus non-confessional style. You can teach those values in a style that is not religious.
My interpretation of when that said religious values, as far as I'm concerned, religious values are human instinct. That's where they got their values from. It's already our values. You don't really need to teach it, and if you do, then that person has issues that you need to deal with. But in keeping that kind of teaching in schools, I do think it is extremely important in the sense it should be taught as critical thinking and empathy. And I think that in particular, critical thinking should be the biggest subject from kindergarten to year 12, should be bigger than English and maths. And it's not in anywhere as far as I can tell at the moment.
Well, we're supposed to teach them in English and maths, like critical thinking, like the interpretation of literature. You're supposed to think critically about it. Maths is supposed to be about problem solving, noticing things. Do our kids give a damn about that? No.
I've heard people argue that it's even science, like they teach science, and that is pretty much just critical thinking, but you really need it as its own subject so you can cover things like politics and religion, and even get into stuff like conspiracy theories and how to try and work out what is and isn't true, and a good way to think about stuff. If it's taught in schools, it will benefit the future greatly. At least a little bit.
I'm not sure how you actually go about teaching it in schools under the current educational frameworks that are in place. I don't know about you, but from my experience of school, a lot of it was not so much thinking, it was memorizing things and then being able to regurgitate them.
Yeah, and it has changed significantly since then. I say this as someone who taught for 2 years full time down in southwest Sydney, and I genuinely tried to get my kids to critically think, and some of them it even worked, but some of them they're not at a place where they can learn to critically think, or they don't want to think about things they don't think are important, if that makes sense.
And that's why you get kids that go through the entire schooling system in Australia and they do science the whole time, yet they don't understand the scientific method, because that is critical thinking, and they were never really shown it. They were just told how to regurgitate facts and do experiments. It's not really teaching them anything.
And I think off of Mitchell's point there about some of them not being ready, I mean, for me, myself, if someone had tried to teach me in a class how to critical think in high school, I don't think it would have stuck. I mean, I didn't really pick up on that until when I was studying at university, and in order to engage in the conversations, you had to apply critical thinking, or you just made a jackass of yourself. And to give a bit of context, being put in the situation where I had to go and apply that critical thinking, and it put me in a spot where I basically had to reassess everything. It's a lot of the reasons why I left the Adventist church, for one, because a lot of the stuff, when you went and applied critical thinking tests to it, it fell not just flat on its face, but hilariously flat on its face.
As they all do.
But then on top of that, I mean, at that point in time, I was a staunch Liberal Party conservative, supporter, as embarrassing as that kind of is now, given where I currently sit.
We've all done embarrassing things in our past.
This is true. But when at that point, because I had to go and apply these things there, I then had to go and look, okay, is the things that I'm being told about the Liberal Party actually true? And do they stand up to scrutiny? And they just didn't. I mean, the simple fact is, the Liberal Party are not good economic managers. Regardless
And the
of...
stuff they say about Labor is always not right. From
Well,
what
I mean,
I've
on
seen.
top of that, it's when someone tells you the Liberal Party are good economics managers, it's not on the person that is it's not on you to prove that they're not. It's on the person making that claim to prove it is true. And until they do that, you can dismiss it. It kind of goes back to I don't know if any of you are familiar with Aaron Ra, but he has a saying. The truth is what the facts are, and if you can't prove it, then you don't know it. No, it's if you can't show it, you don't know it. I knew it rhymed.
Yeah, that sounded right. He tried to run for governor in
He
Texas.
did in Texas, and he never stood a fucking chance.
Oh yeah, of course.
But he tried, so points for trying, I suppose. He has about as much chance as...
Don't they have rules there that atheists can't hold office?
Well, technically in the US Constitution, you can't have a religious test to hold a political office.
Yeah, I know, but technically don't they have rules where atheists can't hold office, ironically?
They do technically have rules, and he challenged them in court. I don't actually know if he won that challenge, though.
One
I'm
might
curious he could
certainly
have
hope
just said
he
I'm
did.
religious. What was that?
One might certainly hope that he did win the challenge.
I would
Yeah,
hope
you-
so,
you-
but I never went back and checked, because, to be honest, he was never going to win, even if he was allowed to. It's Texas.
Well, he did run right up until the election. I've seen at least that much, so I'm guessing he did win those cases.
No.
I know, I've got him on Facebook still. I could check up on it.
Yeah. I think that's probably another thing that we all agree on, that, religion and government should be separate.
Completely.
And actually, speaking of, religion and government being separate, I'm pretty sure I know where David and Tom stand on this, but Mitchell, I'm curious. I have a hunch of which way you'll go on this, but I'm not certain. Abortion.
That one's a difficult one.
Do you think that it should be allowed?
So I'm going to annoy people on both sides of the fence when I say this. I think that life in the womb starts very early. And I think that if it's, say, after brain activity, then you are killing a living being. Having said that, it's going to happen anyway. And I think people will do abortions, and it's far more important that people do them safely. I think the issue around abortion needs to be argued. You don't want to make abortion illegal. You just need to make it as uncommon as possible through consensus of values, or through improving technology to the point where abortion is no longer necessary, if that makes sense.
Okay, so a bit like how you should still have a minimum wage, but you should have a scenario where it's not necessary.
Exactly. I think that, look, it's a difficult situation, and I have to acknowledge, look, I'm a guy speaking for a situation that I will never experience. But with all of that, so I have to be really careful in how I come across, and I can't afford to be dogmatic about it, because I certainly have my views, but there are different interpretations of it. I think once it's past the point of viability, I think there should be a point at which we say, okay, no more. At that point, you should no longer be doing that. You should be delivering it and then maybe adopting it out.
Well, as I understand, that's what happens in the overwhelming majority of cases.
Well, that's good if
That's
that's
what I
the
understand
case.
already happens. I'm fairly sure, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but technically speaking, after the point of viability, it's no longer an abortion, it's being induced.
Yeah.
One might certainly hope so. But in New South Wales, legislation got passed a couple of years ago under Berejiklian that suggested that abortion was legal up to 40 weeks.
Uh-huh.
So
I think that was to cover extreme cases where they medically have to do it for whatever reason. And
well, that's good if that's the case, because
it's more it's classing induction as abortion in those cases because it's the safest way to do it for the woman.
Fair enough. Okay, well that makes me feel a little bit better about everything then.
I think I was just going to say, I think I agree, and I think the best way I've heard it explained, and I feel like Mitchell, you would agree. There's a video that you could probably find, Jono. It's a Jordan Peterson doing a talk, and someone asks him the question. It's live, so he kind of doesn't really get to script it. And I think he puts it as, it's a tough topic. Generally, they are not a good thing, and you wouldn't recommend someone get one, or you wouldn't want to have to do that.
Well, they are a risky disease.
Yeah, you would rather not be in that situation.
Don't treat it like going to get a spray tan or something.
And I think his words were, sometimes there's no good decision left. And I think I agree with that. I agree with Mitchell. It should be avoided at all costs. If we can avoid the situation, well, that's even better.
But it should
I agree.
still be an option.
It should be available.
Yeah,
and I mean,
should be absolutely available. Oh, you go.
That kind of comes back to the thing of the only proven reliable method of reducing the number of abortions is to have proper sex education.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was
Which is
lucky
something
enough
that
to
should
get
be
that
in
one.
religious schools.
And contraceptions.
Well, I was lucky enough to get some decent sex ed in my religious school, so I'm grateful for that. But from what I've heard from other people who've gone to other schools, it's by no means the norm, and I really wish it was. I think the biggest problem too, and I'm going to go off on a bit of a rant here, is the whole purity culture sort of thing. Like, you have to save yourself to marriage, and you're a terrible person if you don't. Like, how badly are you going to mess with someone's self-esteem if they find themselves in a situation where that has happened?
Look, without trying to give away too much, pretty fucking badly. And not just a self-esteem thing, but that sort of shit scars you for life. Yeah,
I mean, I've got a friend whose girlfriend was telling me some of the stuff that they said, and it was made my hair stand on end, the sort of stuff that they said. And yeah, just makes me sad.
Yeah.
Sorry, I actually missed that because something played on my computer. And were you talking about like religious schools teaching
good sex ed versus save it till marriage? You're less of it. Yeah, all of that sort of. Really,
I didn't go to a religious school, but Tom and I grew up pretty similar. Tom's a bit older, so he kind of got it worse. But I know there were some pretty messed up things that he got in just religious teachings in general, not particularly around that. I kind of was a bit younger, so I think the family kind of become a little bit less religious, or stepped away from going to church every Sunday that he did. So I didn't get the scare tactics, I guess. But I know Tom and his older sister did, and it's just like the typical if you do X, you'll go to hell things.
Yeah.
Tom is back, and I was just talking about him.
All good things.
I was just saying about how religious teachings and messed up stuff, and what we had as kids. Well, only you, not me.
The Baptist Church. Yeah. They teach with fear.
I have so much to say about that is outside the scope of this podcast.
Oh, look, I'm in the same boat with you on that one, Mitch. I mean, and everyone's experience is different, but I know that growing up in the Adventist church, I definitely copped a lot of stuff that, looking back on it now, the only fair way I can describe it is child abuse.
Well, bear in mind, you grew up in around Kempsey, which recently had a thing where there was a doctor who was handing out fake vaccination certificates. So I don't think you had much of a chance, looking back.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I have some of the guys that were in the church when I was there on Facebook, and some of the stuff that they post is... What's the polite way of saying this?
I mean, this is a podcast where we're trying to annoy people, so you don't have to be polite about it.
Look, there's a very good chance that I could get murdered in my sleep if I say this the wrong way, because what I am thinking is pretty fucking brutal. The only way I can describe it is Pauline Hanson is not extreme enough for them.
Oh no. Oh, that's bad.
And they were an elder in the church when I was there.
Oh, dear goodness. Dear goodness. Hate that. Hate that a lot.
So, yeah, there's that.
Oh, gosh.
Because I'm not sure exactly how... I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that your experience with the Adventist church was slightly better than mine was.
Look, I was lucky to grow up in churches that I didn't realise they were messed up until after I left.
Yeah, look, I realised they were messed up, and that's part of what caused me to leave.
Oh, sorry, I should say left those churches. I'm still a practicing member, but having moved on from those churches, I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, there's some messed up stuff going on there. Lucky I didn't see that. Yeah, anyway.
For me, it wasn't because obviously I moved on. It was that recognizing and acknowledging those messed up things. It happened at the same time as I was having to reassess basically everything that I believed and how I viewed the world. And it put me in a position where I was able to push myself back to the default position of not accepting something until it's met its burden of proof, and then go and try and prove it. And, well, obviously, I don't accept it, so that's the conclusion I ended up coming to. Yeah, I don't feel that it met its burden of proof, but it was recognizing those messed up things that put me in the position where I was able to just wind back to a default position and go, look, if it is true, then I will end up back there again anyway.
Well, I mean, my perspective these days is there is an ultimate morality. There is an ultimate thing that deep in us, like, it can get messed up by culture, especially religious culture, but there is something within us that yearns for something good. And I think that
I agree with you on that one, but I'm not convinced it's supernatural. I'm
convinced that is the exact same thing that stops piranhas from eating other piranhas' instincts. And it happens in any social species. It's just more complex of us.
So my personal perspective is, and I think this has given me a lot more chill about religion and what I believe, is that you can make an argument. And seeing as we're working with religious propositional truth, let's go to the religious text for a sec. You can make an argument to suggest that everyone will be saved.
Yes, I've heard this argument.
And if I believe that, then maybe it's not on me to convince through cajoling, convincing, trying to scare people in or anything like that. If there is an ultimate goodness, and it is something we recognize as ultimate goodness, and if it is something that people have rejected the church because the church did not display ultimate goodness, if that makes sense, then I need not worry about I need not worry about trying to, if you can make that argument and that's what it says, then I don't know if I'm making much sense, but
I think it's really coming from. If it is ultimately, it sounds like effectively what you're trying to make is a resolution to the moral argument.
Kind of like it, if my religious text says this, then I don't need to worry about trying to prove it, if that makes sense, because if it's true, even if it can't be proved, then I'm not worrying about people going to hell because they, even though they were good people, they didn't accept the one true religion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you don't feel like you don't feel like you have an obligation to proselytize.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like I want to make the world a better place. And whether I do that through charity, whether I do that through the social initiatives that can happen as a part of the religion I'm a part of, in the best way possible, rather than the messed up ways that it could happen, then if I can make, the field I'm going into, can I help people have a life that is free from financial burden, sort of thing? Can I make the world a better place in that respect? That's what I'm going to focus on. I'm just going to make people's lives better because of what I think, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah. Look, I can get behind that, and I think if more religious people had that sort of attitude, I think there'd probably be far less atheist YouTubers.
But yeah, but then you have to contend with the Americans, and the Americans just take everything to the extreme.
They really do. Oh man, so many extreme things. I was watching a documentary deconstructing every internet atheist's favorite young Earth creationist.
Oh, are we talking about Kent Hovind?
Yeah.
Why?
Yes, Mr. Kent Hovind, and that Mr. is intentional because he insists on calling himself doctor, even though his doctor is from a diploma mill. Have you actually read his dissertation?
I didn't feel like brain damage.
Probably good idea, but it starts with, "Hello, my name is Kent Hovind."
I said I didn't feel like brain damage.
But I mean, I think he's a classic example of just the worst kind of religious person. I mean, a kid drowned at his amusement park, and his response, he in his press release talking about it, he's just like, the rest of the family had a great time and said they will come back again.
Bruh.
It's like, dude, a kid just died on your premises.
Look, I will say this for Kent Hovind. He went to prison for tax evasion, and as a libertarian, I think that's pretty based.
Look, to be fair, he broke the law. And for those that don't understand the background, basically, there was the tax law that basically said if a bank has someone come and withdraw an amount over $10,000, they have to report it because it's potentially needs to be investigated for money laundering. So he'd withdraw amounts just under 10,000 so that the bank wouldn't have to fill out that form. Because he was avoiding paying taxes.
And when he was asked why he avoided paying taxes, it was like, I don't want my tax dollars to go to abortions or something it wasn't abortion, it was teaching evolution in schools or something like that. And
he considered himself a sovereign citizen.
Well, I mean, you don't pay tax, you don't pay federal tax at federal tax doesn't go to that. You pay it at the county level in the states anyway. So that's what your property tax is for.
Understand how taxes work.
I'm an Australian and I know how that tax works.
He lives there, is older than you, and doesn't get it.
Oh, look, speaking of taxes and, sovereign citizen was thrown around a moment ago. Mitch, being a libertarian...
Yes.
Thoughts on sovereign citizens?
They're legally illiterate people who... okay, so we have them in Australia. I don't know if you guys have heard this conspiracy theory that the Australian government is actually a corporation. It's listed on the stock exchange or something like that.
Yeah, it usually goes along the line with...
The police employees.
It also goes along the lines with the conspiracy theory that the election that just happened was illegal.
But okay, so you want to know why the Australian government is listed on the stock exchange? So that it can issue Australian government bonds.
Yes.
That is why it is listed on the stock exchange. And you can't buy shares in the Australian government. It's just a provider of financial securities.
That makes sense.
When I was taking a little bit more of a leadership position in my party, I had to answer questions like that, and I was generally able to keep people happy with actually doing the research and showing them, no, there's no conspiracy, and they're like, okay, that makes me feel better. But even if the Australian government was illegitimate according to the Constitution of Australia, you know what makes them legitimate? The fact that they have guns.
Yes.
Ultimately, what it comes down to is the fact that might makes right, and regardless of whether you think that they have legal backing or not, they have de facto power over your life.
That's a nice segue into a rather fun topic of, government, by definition, has a monopoly on violence. The government is supposed to be the only entity that, if you don't follow the rules, can come in with a gun and drag you away. That is literally their purpose, so that there is some kind of order around who gets dragged away. Because I hope that everyone would agree on this, that if you're going to be dragged away and thrown in a cell, there should probably be a good reason for it. Not just because your neighbour thinks your wife is hot.
Or, for instance, because you've been trying to serve papers or return papers to someone who's filled them out wrongly.
Yes. I feel like you're speaking from experience there.
Oh, somebody else's experience.
Oh.
Luckily for me, not for them.
Oof.
But yeah, I mean, actually, this is a problem I have with the whole monopoly on violence thing, because I think that citizens should be a check on the power of government. I think that citizens should be better informed, but take, for example, the insurrection that happened on January 6th last year. In principle, I support people storming government in order to right injustice that is done by government. I think that doing it for Trump was a stupid thing. I think that they were misinformed deliberately, and they were made to feel like there was serious misconduct. There actually wasn't. But in principle, if the government is tyrannical, if, say, for instance, let's have a hypothetical, if we had a party in power that saw fit to clamp down on dissent and
Russia.
You mean a party that sends terror police after journalists for trying to get them to correct legal paperwork?
Don't you think that is some if that was carried to its logical conclusion? Don't you think that the population should have some way of overthrowing them in some way?
Well, I think ultimately that is technically always an option. The big issue I have with it is if the government has become tyrannical, at what point do you have an uprising of the people? I mean, it comes back to an argument, and I hate myself for going here, but looking at Nazi Germany, the argument I've heard from some people is if the Jews had guns, they could have fought back. The question I have is, at what point do they fight back? Before half of them have been dragged off to concentration camps and gassed?
It's like that saying they keep saying. They keep repeating whenever. What is it? It's like they came for these people and I said nothing, and they came for these people and I said nothing. I can't remember.
First they came for the trade unionists, so I did not speak up because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for these. And then they came for me, and there was no one to speak up for me. Yes,
something like that.
And the other thing we have. Oh, sorry, you were saying.
I was going to say my problem with that is I agree with you, Mitchell. Yes, there should be the opportunity for the people to overthrow the government if they become tyrannical, and that is probably part of the reason why typically Americans stand by their Second Amendment to have guns, and that is one advantage. It does make overthrowing the government a little bit easier, but you're never going to be able to outpower the. I guess yes, you can have a whole country stand up against the government and attempt to overthrow them, but if the government really wants to be horrible and start massacring their own citizens, they actually could, because they typically have the military on their own side. But that's where it's kind of like, at what point, like, that technically there is no guarantee that's possible. Like, they could just, they've got the jets and the drones and the entire military against the citizens. Citizens won't win.
If it were to come to that, if it were to come to like all the citizens against the military might, a good portion of the military would probably be on the citizens' side anyway. Like they're citizens themselves, really. And
I mean,
it doesn't make a difference how armed the citizens are, in my opinion.
Leaving aside the examples of Afghanistan and Vietnam, I think it's more worth considering that if a government's able to get that tyrannical, they clearly have a massive propaganda machine that's able to win the battle in the minds of the citizens before a shot needs to be fired as well. And I think that's the biggest and most important place to fight for freedom, is in civil discourse. Like, once civil discourse is gone, it's already too late.
Which kind of comes back to the argument of, at what point do you do an armed uprising? Because by the time, I think most people would agree that by the time you can justify it, it's way too late.
And that is a significant problem as well. So, yeah, I theoretically I like the possibility of it, but there's so many, there are so many variables that need to be considered. And I definitely see where people are coming from in that point.
I think logistically the idea just falls flat on its face.
Well, especially since, if we're coming at it from a perspective of there's already a propaganda thing that's cut out all opposing views, then how are the people supposed to organise in order to rise up?
Yep.
So there is that as well. It's a difficult thing, without, I think without putting it at a what's the right word for it? A conclusion on whether people should have guns or not. I think that's irrelevant to the point of people need to be good people, vigilant citizens, before, be able to vote people out before we ever get to that point.
Yeah, so it's more important to have robust regulation around media than to have people are allowed to have guns.
I think, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Purely from the prospect of trying to prevent tyranny.
Yes, the pen is mightier than the sword. Political activists and governments know this.
Yeah, which is probably, why the recent government, which some people have argued was tyrannical. I'm not sure I'd go that far. I definitely think that they did some pretty fucked up shit. Such as prosecuting journalists for whistleblowing and whatnot. But some of the things that they were trying to do to concentrate media power, at the very least, should be ringing alarm bells in some people's heads.
Yeah. That was one of my biggest concerns, is what they are trying to do with the internet and their anti-bullying stuff that they were trying to pass. It's just an attack of freedom of speech, really, and it's only so they can continue doing what they've been doing, which is basically propaganda.
Interesting. Well, we're already 20 minutes over the amount of time I was expecting this to take this evening, so I think we might wrap it up there. Does anyone have anything they just want to quickly throw out before we wrap up?
Oh, I was going to say something from a libertarian perspective, but I've forgotten what I was going to say, so if I remember,
I was hoping you were going with a joke there.
If I think of it, I'll probably bring it up next time or something.
Fair. Because, we've covered a lot of topics, and we actually talked about the election a lot more sporadically than I was expecting, which is interesting. And just for the record, in the last almost 2 hours, nothing's changed. We still don't know if we have a majority Labour government or not. Look, here's a question we can wrap up on. What outcome, based off of the information we have at the moment, would you prefer? Labour majority or Labour minority?
Majority.
I personally think Gillard did quite well with a minority government. I wouldn't mind seeing one of those. Labor Party's good at compromise, consensus, at negotiation. I'd like to see them play to their strengths.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
I'd probably go to majority.
I think we're so close to a majority that it's pretty much a majority, because they don't have to really win over too many people.
Well, they'd only need to convince one independent.
Yeah.
They need to convince one out of
16.
Potentially 17.
Yeah,
So that's basically majority.
I mean, probably Dai Li. She's in a strong Labour electorate. She'll probably have to represent Labour's interests, represent the interests of her people, who are generally strong Labour voters. Oh, that's something we can leave. We can finish on. No matter what you feel about the election results, we can all agree. Christina Keneally. She's the Hillary Clinton of Australian politics.
Yes.
Got the most irritating voice in the world.
You're not wrong.
Must be why.
I mean, what time did you turn off the ABC's coverage of it on election night, David, because of her voice?
Man, I was muting every time they put a politician on. I was putting it on mute. I did not want to hear them talk. I can't handle it. Yeah. I like what you said, and maybe this brings it full circle, Johnny. When you hear someone talking about something and you can tell they don't know what they're talking about and they're just saying words, it just drives me insane. It's like you're just getting brain damage listening to them, and they always talk. It's like I can't even handle listening to so confidently, full of nothing. It's like Justin Trudeau. I hate listening to him because he talks to everyone like they're a fucking moron. He just pauses every word, and he's always really happy. And it's just
to be fair, you'd have to be a moron to vote for Trudeau.
He's painful. It's like Oh, it's like he's talking to a bunch of preschoolers when he talks. It drives me insane.
I mean, he used to work as a substitute teacher, so that makes sense.
That does make sense then.
I didn't know that. Yeah, that does make sense. But yeah, go and watch a video of him talking. Yeah, it's like it'll be 3 times longer than it needs to be.
I think
Someone
I
should
would,
just like crop out all the pauses.
I think I would rather gouge my eyeballs out. Provided that I then have like a fancy cybernetic eye, because being able to record everything you see would be pretty useful.
And you could make that Commissar cosplay just a little bit more authentic.
Get like a real bulky, like proper gothic 40k one.
I actually went as a Commissar to a birthday a dress-up party back in 2010. It was fun.
Oh, glorious.
I wasn't very good, but I had the great coat, I had the Nerf pistol, I had the East German border guards hat.
Oh look, I routinely consider 3D printing a full suit of power armor.
And why haven't you?
Because it would use about 20 kilos of plastic that would cost a few $100s.
Worth it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'll put money towards that.
I mean, I already have half the sculpts. I just need to make them bigger.
So what? This is very off topic, but what chapter are you thinking?
Grey Knights, of course.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Look, David, basically think of...
I assume it's Warhammer, but I just that's about it.
Look,
That's
Grey
the
Knights can
level
be summarized like this. Take a Jedi and cross them with Master Chief. And then you have 1,000 of them.
Oh, it's not exclusive anymore.
I think that's probably the best way to summarize it. They're basically power armored Jedi with, also, they have a nasty habit of, if you know they exist, they will kill you. Also, oddly off topic, but they have done more damage to Fenris in the space of like 9 months than the Thousand Suns did to Fenris in 10,000 years.
Get wrecked, Thousand Suns. Yeah, dabbed on.
I mean, they're allies with the Space Wolves of Fenris, technically speaking, and they still did more damage than the Space Wolves' arch enemy did. Which no one's going to get that reference, or if they do, they're cool people and get an extra 10 internet points.
Oh, I bought a set of paints for my girlfriend today. She's going to paint up some of my miniatures.
Ooh, fun. But yeah, look, we're going to abruptly end things there. I'm going to click the button and stop things right now. Have fun, subscribe, do all of that stuff.